Right there. I golfed once. Like, bro, got it right at the college parents. Like, he's like, where is it? We got the Justin James. We put it in the bar in my house. They pulled out like the water. Yeah, I got mine. Oh, my water bottle. Yeah, same. Yeah. I guess he did. What's that? Would you like to go first? And then everyone in class is like,
yeah, that looks like that should be your food.
it's a bit different than
What? Yes. Hawaiian Shirt Fridays. Good thing.
You know what? Next Friday I'm bringing
Yes.
Yes. Embedded development versus embedded security. So security.
Yeah.
One, two, but also you can now use physics to tell the electrons are moving together. Imagine the crazy things that
Nope, we've got just one slide and back. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, BWSI. I'm going to ask one question. What is BWSI? I would also like to suggest, based on my current wear, that we do Hawaiian Shirt Fridays. So hopefully you've got one. Hopefully, if not, don't worry about it. But I think we'll add a little color to Fridays this way. And I think some of the staff, we have some very special Hawaiian shirts that we'll wear at the final event as well. So I would also like to introduce Ellie Nywood here. Ellie Nywood is someone I've known for many years, I think over 20 or so now at least. I worked with Ellie in several groups over at Lincoln Lab, as well as an ad hoc committee for Lincoln Lab. And since he's moved to MITRE, and Ellie is one of those guys, you know, he's a leader because he walks the walk, he stands up for what he believes in, and he does the right thing. It's amazing to have him here today, and it's amazing to have him talk about his career at Lincoln Laboratory and MITRE and his college career, and as a great example of sometimes careers aren't a straight line. And it's just really neat to have Ellie here and talking to us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Joel.
One thing I would like to remind people, I know Ellie's going to take breaks for questions. We're going to try and alternate between in-person and on Zoom, just so that everybody's get a chance. At the end, we're going to create a form so that, and send that out to all the students so people can submit questions, because so that way we don't get such a backlog of people trying to ask questions at the very end of the seminar. We want to make sure that questions are answered. We'll get them to Ellie, but we also don't want to prevent you from getting back to class. Thank you. Okay.
Great. Thanks a lot. And thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've done this talk, I think, a couple years now in a row for Beaverworks Summer Institute, but this is the first time I've gotten to do it in person. So really nice to be here and actually see people. I was supposed to do it in person last year, but my daughter had a baby like 3 days before this. So I ended up going down to Virginia. But I still did the seminar. I just did it remotely. So what I want to do today is talk about lessons learned from my career. I often talk about this as systems analysis of an engineer's career. I learned from Bob Shin and others early on what it meant not just to dive deep into the technical details, but how to have the bigger picture in mind. And really, what are you learning from all of the details you are seeing? And so this is me, you know, literally taking a step back and looking across, you know, more than 30 years at this point. What have I learned? You know, what has been useful? Hopefully, things that are useful to you all. And the first of those, if you can, will the chart work? If you can go ahead and put the chart up for me, if that works. If not, the first one that I talk about, I phrase it. Yep, go ahead, hit it once. Go ahead, one. How would you like to work on chaos? You know, Joel mentioned Hawaiian Shirt Friday. If I, you know, realized it was Hawaiian Shirt Friday, I wouldn't have dressed like this. I have to go out to U.S. Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii a couple times a year. And in Hawaii, they don't wear jackets and ties. They wear not Hawaiian shirts, aloha shirts. What's the difference between aloha shirt and Hawaiian shirt? Just the name. They look exactly the same. So I'm going out there. I have 4 days out there. I only have one aloha shirt. So my wife goes online and buys me a couple of aloha shirts, some very classy ones, and one that is very bright, all of like rockets and alien spaceships. And I'm like, you know, this is almost embarrassing to wear, but like, this is who I am, right? And she knows that, right? I still, you know, I'm the vice president of the Air and Space Force Center at MITRE. I do very little engineering hands-on myself. But if you ask me, if someone says, what do you do for a living? I either say I'm an engineer or I'm a rocket scientist, right? You know, depending on who they are. I still think of myself that way. In fact, speaking of shirts my wife has bought for me, my wife also bought for me, it's, you know, Marvin the Martian. It's a polo shirt, and underneath it says, actually, I am a rocket scientist. And what I like about that shirt is my wife bought it for me, and yet every time I wear it, she makes fun of me. I'm like, that doesn't seem fair somehow. But the reason I say this is, how would you like to work on chaos? When I was actually your age, I went out to the University of Southern California for a summer program, in some ways similar to this. It was less class-oriented, it was more research-oriented. I worked for, you know, I was gonna be working for a professor, and I show up, and I'll talk about showing up there again in a couple minutes from a different angle. They have a welcome reception, and someone, you know, an older gentleman starts, you know, walking up to me. His hair is coming out of his head at all different angles, you know, really long. His shirt is untucked, sort of half buttoned. You know, there's a stain on his shirt somewhere. And he comes up to me, he goes, "Oh, you're Ellie? How would you like to work on chaos?" And, you know, with so much enthusiasm and so much, happiness about what he was working on. He was so excited about it. You know, how could I say no, right? I mean, that is, you know, it was just so convincing and so enticing. He was an aerospace engineer. He worked in the Department of Aerospace Engineering at USC. When he talked about chaos, some of you, you know, there's the book Chaos. It's all around mathematical equations that, very sensitive to their initial conditions. So there is a real mathematical meaning behind that term chaos. He didn't quite mean it as like, do you want to blow the place up and have things going all over the place? Although, from looking at him, you might have thought that. And it was just, sort of so telling to me that, being able to take joy in what you work on, A, is important for your life, and B, is important for your work. It's hard. I mean, I would find it hard. I shouldn't say that for everyone. Hard to, get up every morning and go to work and really give it your all if it's something that you are not enjoying. And I don't think anyone should have their work be their life. You don't want your career to take over everything that you do. The way I phrase it is, I want to, and I want the people who work for me to be excited to come to work in the morning and excited to go home when they leave. And I think, that is a balance not always easy to find, but I think is one of those things that if you can find that, if you can find the things that you are excited every morning to get up and do just because you enjoy them, it's incredibly important. And I think, my mind, hallmark to a successful career. I know people who don't have that, right? I know people, I won't say they're all lawyers, but a couple of them are, who, do what they do because, there's good money there, it's stable, they're good at it, but they don't find that same joy in it that I've been able to find in my career. And I think that's something that is incredibly important. If you go ahead, one more on the chart. So I mentioned I went out to USC for the summer, and again, something I'll look back to. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I mean, those of you in person, you can see I wear a yarmulke. So it means that I keep kosher fairly strictly. There are only certain foods that I eat. Foods have to be supervised. I can't just go to a restaurant and eat. And so I'm going to this summer program at USC. I live in New Jersey, flying across the country to California, and don't know what it is I'm going to eat when I get there. Like all the other students in the program will go to the cafeteria and eat there. They'll go out to restaurants at times. There's nothing in the neighborhood around USC I can get to. And so my parents, very smartly, they send me on this trip with a toaster oven in a box that goes under the plane. And that's how I'm going to cook for the summers, in a toaster oven about this big. I can find some frozen food, can eat it up, great. So I get there, it's my first night there, and very honestly, I'm a somewhat sheltered high school student, not that used to sort of going off somewhere, living in a college dorm with people I had never met before, a little uncertain about the whole thing. And it's the first night, and I go to plug the toaster oven in and heat up my frozen food, and it doesn't work. And try it again, doesn't work again. I get the RA, he probably was a college student. He seemed much older. Maybe he was even a graduate student. I don't know. Who's sort of supervising us for the summer. And he comes and he takes out his pocket knife and he unscrews the side of the toaster oven. This is in the day when these things are still relatively mechanical and simple, so you could actually poke around in them. And he says, "Oh, this wire came loose. You can borrow my pocket knife, just get the wire, under the screw it back down, close it back up, and it should work." He says, "But be very careful, unplug it before you open it up. Make sure it's unplugged while you're playing with the wire, then close it back up and then plug it in and try it." Okay, so I do that once, and still doesn't work. I open it up, and it turns out, while I'm closing it up, I didn't get the wire under there well enough, for it to hold when I put the screw on, and do it again, it keeps happening. I can't get that wire, to stay under the screw the way it's set up and the way I can sort of reach it. And very careful every time I unplug it first, and then I plug it back in when it's all closed up and I try it doesn't work. And one time I must have forgotten to unplug it before I open it up. So I open it up, I go to put the screwdriver in the screw to open it up to, I'm holding onto the wire and bzz, I'm shocked, right? And like now I'm practically in tears, right? But I'm like, okay, close it back up, plug it in, and I try, and it worked. What happened, right? Besides the current shocking me, it basically soldered the wire in place, and the thing worked for the rest of the summer. Okay, so there is a moral to this story, which is, look, it was scary for me to go off to USC for the summer. There was a lot of uncertainty around it. And one of the things that it sort of helped me realize is you will come to many branch points in your life, in your career. And you'll have different choices. And I think the choice you always want to make is the choice that scares you. There's something you can do, there's something you don't know you can do. Reach for that thing that you don't know that you can do. Bob and Joel know this. I started at Lincoln, working for Bob. We worked on this project called the Air Force Red Team. I did numerical modeling, which was right up my alley. I'm a numerical modeler by training. And so I've been doing that for a while. And felt it was time to do something different. And I had an opportunity to go work at the engineering division in Lincoln, which is where they operate the machine shops and the clean rooms, and they build big things. Okay, when I was a student about less than half a mile from here, over in Building 35 and Building 33, we had junior project where they bring everyone down to the machine shop and they tell you how to use the machine shop so you can build something over the course of the year. And so there's a week of learning how to use the tools in the machine shop. I'm the student who at the end of the week, they said, Ellie, whatever you need done in the machine shop, we will do it for you. Not because they liked me better, but because they didn't want someone breaking their expensive machine tools. And they knew that was me. Okay, so here I go run this division at Lincoln that, I couldn't have done the most basic things that people in the division could do. So again, what is it that is going to stretch you? What is it that is going to be hard for you, where you are going to learn new things? When you come to those branch points, I think it's critical that you think about what's going to be hard and really stretch yourself and do things that are scary to you. Okay, go ahead, next click for me. Don't cry, Gwen. Maybe I shouldn't use the real name. Gwen is my oldest granddaughter. It's COVID, so, not completely working from home. I actually, because of the kind of work I do, most days I would go in, but I happen to be working from home, in part because my son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter, at the time I only had the one, were visiting. And I'm on a meeting, and, my wife is watching. She's a year and a half old at the time. And my meeting is about nuclear command, control, and communications, what we call NC3. NC3 is all about, if nuclear war were to start and, and there's explosions going on and infrastructure is destroyed, how do we make sure that the president can still talk to the missile fields and the bombers and do the command and control that he needs to under these incredibly, incredibly challenging circumstances? And so I'm having my meeting in our dining room, and in the living room, my wife is playing with Gwen. And Gwen, comes, wants to play with me, right? Like, why isn't Grandpa playing? And my wife says, Gwen, leave Grandpa alone. He's saving the world for humanity. And look, nothing we talked about in that meeting, was going to directly save the world, right? But the reality is that having robust NC3 in this particular case is critical to the safety of the world. And if we don't have it, the world is a little less safe place. It matters. in, important ways. I'll say the opposite of that. I'm a graduate student here, and I get the chance to go to a conference in Viareggio, Italy. I haven't been outside the US much at that point in my life. What a great opportunity. It's like next to Pisa and, a couple hours from Florence. It was a great trip, great conference. And I'm sitting in a room probably a quarter the size of this one. And I'm giving a talk about my work. It's why I get to go to the conference. And, I give the talk and I look around the room and I am 100% confident there is no one in that room who knows more about magnetoplasma dynamic thrusters and how they work than I do. And anyone who has a question, I will be able to answer it. At the same time, there was no one outside the room who could care less about magnetoplasma dynamic thrusters. And, look, there's a lot of good research topics and you never know what will become important. I'm not saying don't do research, in some of these more minor areas, but, the difference between working on something that, almost no one in the world cared about and working on things that are critical, to the, existence of the nation and the safety of the world. If you can find those things that will have that kind of impact, again, I think really powerful for people in their careers. Let me take a break just for a second. Questions people had, comments before I move on? Yeah.
How does one get into being in that position? Like, oh, today I've decided I want to help out in case we get hit by nukes. What's that like? Yeah, so question was, how does one get into a position where they have the opportunity to work on things like, like NC3? Look, exactly what path I took to get there, as Joel, I think, mentioned, my career has taken many different paths, a long time. I think you are making little choices all the time about, what it is you study, what you do for the summer, what kind of work you do. And I think, you never know which choice is going to take you down which path. But you have some sense, look, of the two of these options or the three of these options, or, I could go to school here, I could go to school there, I could study this, I could study that. Just do your best to say, what will allow me to do things that are important. And, it won't be, oh, I want to do X and you pursue. So there are people who do that. I would say for me, it's been more, oh, how do I go work somewhere that works in the national interest, right? I'm at a nonprofit, whether it's Lincoln, whether it's MITRE, that is focused on those things and in the areas that I pick. Good. Anything online before I go on?
We currently don't have any Q&As online. Oh,
Okay.
we just got one. All right, Howie, do you want to share it?
So Dania is asking, how do you know that the career path you have chosen is right for you, and how to persist in your work when you choose the option that gives you important work that may scare you, or you don't think you are able to achieve it right away?
Yeah, so I just to make sure I got the question right, how do you know you picked the right thing, right?
Yeah, like how do you know the career path is right for you, and how to persist when it scares you?
Yeah. So again, there's all kinds of scary, right? There's, there are lots of things I cannot do. Someone said to me the other day when they were little, they wanted to be a basketball player. They're like 5'5". They said, at some point I realized that I was not going to make it in the NBA, right? And so, look, I think you have to have some sense of, what are the things that are reaches for you, but within possibility, right? All of you are here. So presumably you all have some set of skills in math and basic science. You all have some predilection that way. You have to have some sense of ability as you make those choices, right? And then, what's right for you, I think sometimes you have to try it. And again, I think one of the great things about what you're doing this summer is you have not made an irreversible commitment to the area of the class that you are in today, right? You are trying something and seeing, do you like it? Are you good at it? Does it excite you? I think that's a great way to do it, right? Is try different things, try them on and see. All right, let me go on and I'll take more questions later. Go ahead to if you could click it one more time. I'm relatively new staff person at Lincoln, and this is in days before you had computer-driven displays, right? What we had was, and probably in this room, I had it once when I was a student. You had like this box with a giant bulb on it, and you would lay pieces of plastic on it, and the pieces of plastic would get projected on, right? View graphs, right? I mean, they were, the view cells and all of that. And the way it worked at Lincoln at the time, you'd get them printed by the graphics department. You had to put them in a week before, and then you'd get them 3 days later, and then they'd be ready for when you go to give a talk. So I've got this like stack of 20, pieces of plastic basically in these paper frames that are going to be the first time I'm going down to Washington and I'm briefing the sponsor on the work that I've been doing. So this is a big deal for me. And so I practiced that talk, over and over again. I practiced it in the morning when I would get to work. I practiced it before lunch. I'd practice it in the afternoon after, I'd had my afternoon snack and a drink, and I practiced like crazy. And so get to Washington, put the first chart on the big projector, because like I haven't been practicing on a projector. I've been practicing just, putting them on my lap and looking at them. Practice on projector and put the first one up, and title chart looks pretty good, and there's a little bit of a smudge in the corner. Like, okay, it's not a big deal. Put the second chart on, and now it's not just a smudge. You can see a couple of my fingerprints on the chart. And I put the third one up there, and you can see my hand, right? Pretty clearly there. So what happened? I like chocolate. And so, I was practicing after my afternoon break, when I often had like a chocolate bar or something like that as a snack. And my hands were dirty as I'm handling these pieces of plastic. And, it's a little embarrassing. And, I'm looking at my boss. It was Lou Thurman. It was there. I'm looking at the sponsor. And, sponsor makes some joke about it. And tension goes out of the room, right? Like they're okay with it, right? It was nice. But I think one of the things that, that I sort of learned, from that over time is, practice is good, but practice doesn't make perfect. I'm here giving you all this briefing. I don't actually know what the next word I'm going to say is, right? Bring yourself, be you, don't go in never having thought of it. I do have an outline over there, and I'm going to look at it every now and then. But there's something about spontaneity. There's something about really speaking from yourself and from the heart that makes a big difference. And you don't want to lose that and be like so polished and so smooth that people don't feel like it's really you that they're seeing. Okay, go ahead. One more click for me. And one reason I need to notes is because otherwise I got to really look up and I don't remember exactly what comes up. At one point, actually, when I'm changing jobs at Lincoln, and I'm going to go work for someone I've never worked for before. And someone I know tells me, "Oh, you're not going to like working for him. You work really hard, and every day at 8 o'clock, I see him at his desk, and he, it's 8:15, it's 8:30. He's got his feet up on the desk. He's reading the newspaper. This is, just not a hard worker, not in the Lincoln tradition." And I start to work for this person, and I'm actually pretty impressed with them. And turns out I really enjoy working for them. But I haven't quite figured out the 8 a.m. thing. What's going on? Why is it taking it so easy? And then one day I had to show up for various reasons. I had to show up at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's one other car in the garage. And I'm like, hey, that's my boss's car. And I go, and he's at work. Working hard at 6 a.m. So what had been happening? This is someone who showed up at 6, right? Worked really hard for 2 hours, took a short break, at 8 o'clock to have their breakfast. And then, of course, got back to work and worked really hard for the rest of the day. And so, two lessons that, I sort of learned from that, both I think important. One is people aren't always what you might see, first brush, and take a little time to understand them. The second, maybe even more important one is, my wife always tells me this, I don't think she made it up, she got it from her. People don't leave bad jobs, people leave bad bosses. And you really want to think about, look, even when you go to college, who's your advisor going to be? Certainly when you go to graduate school, who your graduate advisor is going to be, incredibly important decision, and incredibly important that they are the kind of person, not just have the knowledge, but the kind of person you want to work for and learn from. Like I said, this person, who read his newspaper every morning at 8 a.m. was an incredible boss in the way that he empowered his people. He let them shine in ways that they had not been allowed to. He had taken the job over relatively recently, they had not before. And people just like blossomed under him. Like how you wake up in the morning and if there's a flower there that was never there before. He came in and there were people who had sort of been discounted as not being great leaders, not being great engineers, who just all of a sudden you see this incredible side of them. They benefited from that. I benefited from that. I learned from that. You are going to learn from the people you work for, from the professors that you have, who you do research for. You can learn negative lessons from them. You can learn positive lessons from them. Learning those positive lessons, people sometimes ask me, what's my management style? It doesn't have a name. It's the best of what I got from Bob. It's the best of what I got from this person. It is the best of all of these things that I have taken and sort of made my own, but all of which came from finding the kind of people that you want to work for. Again, you're not at graduate school stage yet, but you hear stories about people who work for graduate advisors who are just terrible, right? Who treat their students poorly, who harass them. It's hard to recover from those things. Pay attention, again, not just to the work, but to the person that you are aligning yourself to. I think that's something that's incredibly important. Let me pause there again if there's any questions, and then I'll keep going.
So we have a question from one of our virtual attendants. They asked, when would you try to overcome a limitation or flaw versus accepting it and playing to your strengths?
Yeah, when would I try to overcome a limitation or a flaw versus playing to my strengths? There are things. I'll give an example. How do you tell an introvert engineer from an extrovert engineer? Everyone know? The extrovert engineer looks at your shoes when they're talking to you, not their own. Okay, so I look at my own shoes, right? I am an introvert. It takes energy for me to be in a crowd and to interact with people. I don't know if that's a flaw. It is but it's not a strength either. So I work hard to overcome that. I will deliberately, there are times when you need to socialize, right? You need to go and talk to people. On the other hand, I also recognize that I can only push it so far, right? And that, I cannot, night after night go out to dinners with people. It will exhaust me and I will not have the strength I need to do my work. So I would say it's less about, fixing that flaw or never confronting it. It is about how do you work with it, push yourself, enough to do the things you need to do to be, to get your work done, to be successful, whatever it is, but also recognize that there's only so far you can go. Okay, go ahead. Why don't you click the chart one more time? So I mentioned, and Joel talked about having beliefs and sticking to them. So as I mentioned, I'm an Orthodox Jew. So beyond keeping kosher, it also means that I keep the Sabbath, which starts at roughly sundown Friday night and ends roughly at sundown Saturday evening. If you're in Boston in the winter, sundown Friday is pretty early. It's Sabbath can start as early as 4 p.m. And so I'm working at Lincoln, and I've probably been there about a year. And every day I leave. I mean, every Friday I leave. And people know I don't hide it. I'm open about it, and I am rigorous about it. I might, push it a little bit late, if the traffic is bad, but I leave, when I need to. And we had this important rush project come in where basically I was the one who figured out we had all these pieces of paper with drawings on them. Again, this is in a previous day. We had to figure out how to get those drawings, paper drawings, into electronic form. And it involves, we do some work with Adobe Illustrator and you're clicking on points and digesting them. And I'm the one who sort of knows the process end to end. I get some people to help do various pieces of it, but I'm sort of the only one who can take it from one end to the other. And it's Friday. I'm not paying much attention to the clock. And my boss comes over and puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "I think you need to go home now." And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm in the middle of work. You sending me home? Did I do something wrong? And he goes, "No, Sabbath is coming." And like, it really struck me. This is someone who I'm pretty sure, did not think being an Orthodox Jew was a good thing, right? Just wasn't someone, again, nothing wrong with him, just, doesn't think other people should believe. But he knew that it was important to me. Probably 10, 15 years later, I'm a group leader now, sort of in the same group that I've been in. I leave, again, every Friday I'm gone. There's another person, actually the assistant group leader, just happens by chance, is also an Orthodox Jew, also leaves. And someone comes into my office and they say, "Look, I just want to tell you," someone relatively new, but had been there probably about a year, he says, "I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And because of that, I observe Sabbath on Saturdays and I have to leave early on Fridays. Is that okay?" And I look at him like, "Don't you see that I leave?" So I don't know if he lived further away from work than I did, or maybe the Seventh-day Adventist Sabbath starts a little earlier, but he left every Friday before I did. And so he didn't know that 5 minutes after him, I was out the door, right? And I actually felt bad, like he shouldn't have been at all uncomfortable coming to me. So it's important, it doesn't have to be religion, whatever it is for you. But you have beliefs, you have things that are important to you, that have meaning to you. Don't hide them and stick to them, right? Let people know what matters to you. And really, again, don't let other things get in the way of that. And the fact that I think I was rigorous about it is part of why this person, came up to me and said, "You need to go now," because they knew it mattered to me. They knew it was something that I wouldn't, knowingly, sort of violate or step against. And so that's what made it important. And so related to that, go ahead and click one more time. I want to talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion and all religions and races and genders and gender orientation and economic backgrounds and veteran status and handicap status. Again, I'm a vice president at MITRE. I lead a team of something like 1,000 people. There are things I do every day that can make people feel more like they belong or make people feel less like they belong. There are things you all do every day, even just as high school students, even when you are early in your careers, that also have those same kinds of impacts. And I think we all need to be conscious of what we are doing and how we are doing it. And are we making our fellow students, our coworkers, our colleagues of whatever form, feel like they are included and feel like they belong? It's one of those things, I think it's important. I tell people it's a good thing to do just because it's a good thing to do. In the field I work in, we can only hire US citizens. We can only hire people who can get a clearance. We can obviously only hire people who are good we only want to hire people who are good technically, right? So we have all these constraints that are real constraints. If we rule anybody else out, we won't have the workforce that we want, right? And so we need to be inclusive in all these other ways, not just do it for the good of it. And the reason I put this quote up is someone who worked for me, came up to me one time at work and they said, "Oh, I hear this terrible news about your homeland. How are you doing?" And took me a while to think about it. I realized, he was talking about things that were going on in Israel at the time. I'm like, I was born here. My parents were born here. This is my homeland, right? I am a US citizen doing US defense work. And I don't think he meant it in a nice way, but it made me feel excluded. It made me feel other, right? And again, I don't have to worry at this point in my career about someone discriminating against me. I'm doing quite well, thank you. But it still had impact on me. So if that had impact on me, imagine the impact it would have had on someone who isn't at the same place in their career as I am. And so again, I just urge you all, think about these things, be conscious of what you are doing and can do as you get there. Go ahead and click the chart again. In terms of sort of, what gives me satisfaction work, again, at a very different stage than you all are at, but again, I talked about that presentation I gave at Lincoln. When I started there, we have an annual conference every year, the Air Vehicle Survivability Workshop, and it's a big deal as a new staff member. You get to give a talk at the workshop. That's a great thing. One year, I got to give 3 talks. Only 2 are mine. Someone else was sick, but whatever. I got to give 3 talks. I was very proud of myself. And that was sort of like, the height, right? I mean, this is, you're doing great work. You get to present it in a room of this size, probably, full, every seat taken, people standing in the back. Then about 5 years later, I'm sitting there at the conference. I'm not giving a talk, but every speaker who gets, or almost every speaker who gets up, is someone I either hired or mentored or helped them prepare that briefing. It was an incredible realization, incredible feeling to me that, oh, I'm not giving 1 talk. I helped make 20 talks better. And, again, you all maybe not there yet in your careers or, not even starting careers, but you will be there one day. The feeling of empowering other people to do good work, really, really great. So then actually about 2 years ago, I'm at MITRE now, and I get invited to come to the same conference, and I go. And so, of course, I haven't made any of the talks. I haven't helped with any of the talks. But the woman who is sitting in the seat that I was sitting in, watching, the people I had helped give briefings, is a woman I hired and trained. And I had this incredible satisfaction of, oh, I helped her. And now she is helping these people. It's just a great feeling of accomplishment, that you have had that kind of impact. And so again, finding those careers, I think where you can have that kind of impact. Great. Go ahead and click one more time. I have one more lesson and then I'll stop for questions. Anyone in the room seen the movie Airplane? Yeah. Okay. Look, you all are high school students. I signed all this paperwork before I came. I'm not going to tell anyone that they should go see an R-rated movie that is maybe no longer appropriate. It's from a long time ago. But I just finished listening to an audiobook by the directors of Airplane about the making of the movie. And so 2 things that, there are a lot of things about that come up in that book, which again, I'm not going to repeat here. But 2 things I think really appropriate, talking about careers. So one is they had a set of rules that they had developed over time, for how to make a movie and how to make something funny. Rule number 1, like don't push a joke too far. Rule number 2, act serious while you're telling the punchline. Rule 15, there are no rules, right? And then there was another story that they tell. Actually, I think one of the directors told the story at a commencement speech. He was growing up, his house catches on fire. The firemen pull up. And they're trying to get the ladder off the truck, and they're trying to get the ladder set up. They're wasting all this time. And next door to his house, this old woman, Mrs. Zubatsky, I can't remember her name, is on her porch, on the upper floor, hanging her clothes out to dry. And Mrs. Zubatsky screams down at the firemen, "Stop futzing around with the ladder. Take your hose and point it at the fire." And they do, and they put the fire out in no time. And so the lesson that the directors learned from this is, look, just because someone's in a uniform, just because someone's the expert, just because I'm the vice president of MITRE standing up here talking to you, there are things that that person doesn't know. And look, the experts may often be right, but they are not always right. And whatever rules I can give you, there are no real rules, right? You have to decide for yourself in the moment what is the right thing, not being afraid of who the teacher is, who the experts are, and having confidence that you know something that they don't, and you can do great things with that. So let me stop there. I'm happy to take more questions, happy to discuss any of this.
Yeah.
Take some time. Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned that like you're like a leader and like you manage like 1,000 people, especially a lot of people. So you talk about like helping them like feel heard, but how exactly do you help like so many people feel heard when you're just one person with like so much time?
Yeah. So the question is, as I mentioned, I lead like 1,000 people. I want them all to feel heard. How, I can't go up to 1,000 people every day and say, what do you have to tell me, right? So I think a couple things. One is I think it's my job to create a culture where the leaders who work for me, again, I talked about those, those briefings, and I'm not making them. I'm helping someone help someone make them. I think part of what I do is I help leaders under me who lead 100 people create the culture I believe is the right culture, where we are transparent and our doors are open and people can come to them. I try to get out and see people. So some of those 1,000 people, some of them are in Germany, some of them are in Honolulu, some of them are in California and Dayton. I spend way more time than I'd like traveling, so I see smaller groups of people. I do what are called skip level meetings. So I meet with my managing directors one level below me. I also meet with department managers a level below them. I have lunches. I send out a note to everyone in the center. We're going to do lunch on this day. Go on the web and sign up. I will say I try hard, but people are still scared. You're a new staff person who's just been there. There are people who are scared to come talk to me, right? My office is up in some corner somewhere with other MITRE officers. No one just comes up to visit us, at random. It's hard, breaking down those walls is a challenge, but those are some ways I try to break that down.
A question from the virtual audience is, how do you pick a good advisor or mentor?
Yeah, how do you pick a good advisor or mentor? Again, I think a piece of it is not just looking at their work, but looking at them. Are they the kind of person that you respect? And again, it may not always the easiest thing to tell, but hopefully you've had some interaction with them. I would say the other thing, again, this is something my wife does a lot of mentoring and counseling of graduate students that she talks about, is talk to other graduate students. They often know who are the great advisors and who are the, no kidding, harassers, right, that are out there. And so tapping into your own networks to understand, what are the kind of people out there that you would want to work for, I think is a great way to do that. Good, yeah.
So obviously your reputation kind of precedes you, but when you're working with a lot of people, especially like with those working under you, like what is your, I guess, biggest way, other than just kind of like being at a higher up position, that you can get people on the same page, especially if they're kind of disagreeing with you or there's like internal conflict going on?
Yeah. So I would say there are two things, and one, again, speaking of like no rules, right? And the firemen in their uniforms, look, I am not someone who believes a lot in reputation, for better or for worse. I'm like, what have you done for me lately, kind of person. So I think one thing is, demonstrating your understanding and your willingness to put the time in to understand what people are doing, right? So when you can go into a project review or have a discussion with people and show that you have sort of the technical chops to understand, what they are talking about, I think that, is one way to sort of, to sort of make that difference. I think, and to gain people's trust and to, help see what's really going on. I think the other thing is, never being afraid to, sort of literally, or more, I guess, really figuratively, roll up your sleeves and get involved, in the work. you know, you don't want to do people's work for them. You don't want to micromanage them. You know, it's not my job to, you know, spend all my day making, you know, a view graph or a data analysis. But when it needs to be done, I will, you know, help do it. And I think that helps a lot, you know, gaining people's trust and, you know, letting them know who you are and that you are there for them and that you have the ability to help with those kinds of things. Go ahead.
Given your leadership experience, what advice do you have for creating a safe and supportive environment in engineering team?
Yeah, you know, again, it is hard. I mean, it's something I don't do nearly as well as I'd like to do, but you know, demonstrating that you are an ally, you know, to people and that you will stand up for them and do what is needed. I think is one way you can do it. I'll give an example. In the engineering field, certainly in the national security side of the engineering field, you know, the whole idea of people putting, you know, pronouns in their email signature, using pronouns, we were relatively late to that game, I would say, still not quite there. And, you know, for various reasons, when I became an officer at MITRE, I put my pronouns, you know, in my email signature because, you know, again, like I'm at a point in my career where people are not likely to discriminate against me because I do that. And, you know, my pronouns are relatively obvious. I mean, Ellie, maybe not the most right name, but, you know, if you see me, you can guess, you know, he, him, his, right? But there are other people at MITRE who were not in a position to put their pronouns in their email signature with as little fear as I did. They're relatively new. Maybe their pronouns aren't what you might guess, you know, when you look at them. And so I think there are steps we each can take to build that safe environment for others, again, by demonstrating that we will be there for them and supportive of them when they need that.
When it comes to areas outside of your expertise, and you have to make decisions based on that, what would you do?
Yeah, so the question was, when it comes to areas outside your area of expertise and you have to make decisions, what do you do? So again, I mentioned I ran the engineering division at Lincoln for a number of years, and you know, there were decisions that were being made all the time that, you know, we at one point, if any of you have ever been up to Westford, Mass, there's a giant radar dish there. I don't know, the radome is probably from here to the back of the room, Joel, something like that. And we had to cut the top off the dish, off the radome, lift it up with a giant crane, put it down on the ground and bolt it down securely enough so like if there was a tornado, it wouldn't come off. Okay, I have no idea what it's going to take to do that. But I worked with people, and again, I had a sense of who are the people who, no kidding, are experts. You know, I would ask enough questions of them to know if they were BSing me or they really knew what they were talking about. And, you know, and I had a team, you know, who had that expertise, and I had faith in them to answer those questions for me. And then I trusted what they put together. Good. From online or from here? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you learn what's really important in your life? Like you said that the life and work and what's really important and how have an equilibrium there, because sometimes your work is important because you really like it, or you still have other things to do in life. So how do you manage that?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great question. You know, and I would say, look, different things make demands on you at different times, right? And you know, there are times when work is more, you know, there's something urgent that needs to be urgent and important that needs to be done at work. There's something urgent and important that needs to be done at home. And you know, you can't always focus on one. You'll lose the other. I think you need to balance. You know, example I give is, you know, again, Bob and I were involved in a project. This is before 9/11 that I'll say was around air defense in the Washington, D.C. area. And so when 9/11 happened, you know, Lincoln shut down, the Air Force Base shut down, everyone went home. I went to work and we worked, you know, I went home at night for a couple hours each night, but we were in a secure vault in a basement, 20 hours a day. It mattered. It was important at the time. There are other times, when my kids were younger, I made sure at least one class trip every year I made no matter what, right? I would sign up for it at the beginning of the year. It's marked on my calendar. Whatever came up at work, I would be on that class trip that I committed to my kids. And look, it'd be great if it was more than one, and some years I made more than one, but you have to carve out time for both, and you have to recognize that both will need to flex for the other at times. Hopefully those conflicts don't run into each other. There were the mornings when one of my kids would come down, saying, Mommy, Daddy, my ear hurts. I'd look at my wife and she'd be all dressed up because she had an important meeting, and she looked at me and I'm all dressed up because I have an important meeting. And we get on the phone and we say, Grandpa, can you get on the train and take the train to Boston and be here in 3 hours? And we were very lucky. My dad got on that train, for 3 hours and came up and took care of our kids when they were sick. But hopefully those important times don't conflict. Sometimes they do, and you figure out what you can do. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, yeah.
I had a question when it comes to like communication. Obviously, throughout your work, communication is very important. In a group setting, when you're talking with others, how do you pitch and advocate for your own ideas while trying not to undervalue others?
Yeah. So you'd have to ask the people who work for me how good I am at that, because I think sometimes I have strong ideas. I am vocal. I don't know that I always give people the room that I should, so I think I'm very good at advocating for my own ideas. I'm not sure if I'm as good as letting others, advocate for theirs and being open to them. But I also, try to recognize that bias and try to deal with it. I think, the one thing I think about a lot is that, the best ideas actually come from, the constructive, tense debates that you have with people, and finding people who are sort of willing to engage and willing to have that kind of dialogue with you, with respect, right? Not calling each other names, but respecting each other's capabilities is where the best ideas come from. I have a very close coworker who always, he's on my back completely. He says, Ellie, we're still in the ugly baby phase. Don't quash the ideas, right? The baby might be, but you got to let it go. And I do try. I'm trying to be better. Even at my stage, there are things I need to improve at. But I think it is how do you sort of welcome the ideas, but probe so that everyone ends up with a better idea coming out of it.
Ellie, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I understand that MITRE has an internship program for high school students.
So I should check what the latest is. So we have in the past had an internship program for high school students. It was last year, just after COVID, coming out of COVID, was just down in McLean, was the only place. So MITRE has two main campuses, one here in Bedford, one in McLean, Virginia. I think the high school program is still running in McLean, and folks who are interested for next year, certainly reach out to me, reach out to Mike. Happy to try and make connections. And certainly by the time you get to college, we hire a lot of college interns. And I would say this peer I mentioned, who I argue with all the time, was a MITRE intern and is now a MITRE vice president. And Keoki Jackson, who is my boss, the head of national security at MITRE, was a MITRE intern 35 years ago, something like that, left MITRE, now came back and, is essentially, right under the CEO. So it's a great way to start a career. We are always looking for good interns, certainly at the college level, and even a couple at the high school level, I think. Good.
So I would like to have Arthi and Elliot come down. As we mentioned earlier, Ellie has been a huge supporter of STEM activities. In fact, MITRE sponsors 3 BWSI courses: quantum software, embedded security, and microelectronics. We have Mike McGivern here from the microelectronics course, and it's super to see the support from MITRE that helps out and provides courses for you. So I'm going to hand the mic.
Hi, I'm Arthi Vidyanathan.
I'm Elliot Jang.
And we're in the Embedded Security and Hardware Hacking course, and we'd like to present you with this BWSI shirt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here and giving this talk for us. I found it really compelling that part of your top 10 important lessons from your career was not negotiating on your core beliefs and your morals, which I found to be really important, especially in the world of engineering where ethics can kind of get a little blurry.
Yeah, sometimes. Yep. Great. Thank you.
I thought it was really helpful. Like Arfi said, that we should like stick to our core values within ourselves, and also about like spontaneity and like how we shouldn't really worry too much about the stuff that's going ahead. I think this will really like help me out a long way in my life. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you all for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Great to be here.
Can we?
All right, Lisa, do we have announcements? I think the answer is yes.
Thank you.
So clearly we're going to have Aloha or Hawaiian Shirt Fridays. So let's see what we can do next week. So for a week from today is the Draper Tour. You have to have a lanyard to get into Draper. That they're using that for pictures, excuse me, for identification. So if you don't have your lanyard or if you've lost it, please see us and so we can get it replaced.
All right, we can start dismissing classes. So first, we're going to do race car. Chris is waiting for you out front.
Please make sure